All right, welcome to the Monday, February 1st, Human Services Committee meeting. We have a
Recording
quorum.
in progress.
Okay.
I'm going to read our remote order, HS1. As a result of an executive order issued by Governor J.B. Pritzker suspending in-person attendance requirements for public meetings, the Human Services Committee members and city staff will be participating in this meeting remotely. Due to the public health concerns, residents will not be able to provide public comment in person, but they will be able to do so here virtually. I move approval.
Second.
Alderman Braithwaite,
Yes, sorry, I was muted.
Alderman Simmons,
Aye.
Alderman Ravel,
Aye.
Alderman Fleming.
Aye.
And I don't see Fiscal. Okay.
Okay, motion passes. HS1, staff recommends approval of the meeting minutes of regular meeting December 7th, 2020. I move approval.
Second.
Is there any discussion?
Seeing none.
Alderman Braithwaite,
Yep, I'm good.
Alderman Simmons,
Aye.
Alderman Ravel,
Aye.
Alderman Fleming.
Aye.
Motion passes. HS2, staff recommends approval of the meeting minutes for the regular meeting January 4th, 2021. I move approval.
Second.
Second.
Is there any discussion?
Alderman Braithwaite,
Good. Yeah, aye.
Simmons,
Aye.
Alderman Ravel,
Aye.
Alderman Fleming.
Aye.
Okay.
Motion passes. And next we have public comment. It looks like we have two signed up, Alex Piper and Bill Geiger. Welcome. Please unmute and turn your video on, and you each have 3 minutes. Welcome to the meeting.
Do you want me to?
Yes, please, Alex. Welcome.
Alderman Bruce Simmons. I have been lurking in the background of this exploration of alternatives to emergency responding in Evanston, and I just would like to publicly thank the many people who got us to this point. First, I want to thank Mayor Haggerty for getting the ball rolling in the summer series on police responding, as he brought so many thoughtful speakers to share on this topic. Next, I want to thank Alderman Ravel for being an early and committed champion for this potential program in Evanston. Finally, big thanks to Alderman Fleming taking the reins and choosing and guiding such a dedicated, strong, and thoughtful group of Evanstonians in this subcommittee. And thank you to all the task force members who have committed so much time on analysis, discussion, and creativity to reimagining how Evanston can best serve all of our residents in a supportive and comprehensive way. I now urge the Human Services Committee and subsequently the board to seriously consider this proposal and dedicate the necessary resources to this proposed model grounded in public health, where we lift up the safety of all Evanston residents, knowing that Evanston cannot be whole, safe, and strong until all of our residents are cared for and allowed to grow in a holistic and compassionate way. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Alex.
Thank you. My name is Bill Geiger. I was born and raised in Evanston. I'm a former Evanston resident, and from 2003 to 2014 was president and CEO of the McGaw YMCA in Evanston. I can't tell you how excited I am and how much I appreciate this opportunity to voice my enthusiastic support for the proposed street naming in honor of Morris Dino Robinson. Dino's contributions to the entire community, and especially the African American community, are extraordinary. His contributions are worthy of this honor. I will speak tonight just of Dino's important work related to the YMCAs in Evanston. Prior to the publishing of Gatherings, I hope you can see a copy of the book. Prior to the publishing of Gatherings, the history and activities of the Emerson Street Branch YMCA in 2004, there was little formal recognition of the enormous impact of the Emerson Street Branch YMCA on the Black community in Evanston. Without Dino's research, and more importantly, his deep passion for telling this story, it would not have been shared and appreciated by Evanstonians, Black and white. Working with Dino, I deeply appreciated his spirit of partnership and of truth-telling. I grew greatly in my understanding of Evanston, unlearning and learning the real history of my hometown. When it came time to celebrate the 125th anniversary of the YMCA's in Evanston in 2010, Dino again was a partner playing a key role in the gala celebration of the Emerson Street Branch YMCA, attracting 450 Evanstonians and contributing to the creation of the award-winning documentary Unforgettable, seen by countless people, including many ETHS students. In January 2020, at the McGaw YMCA Gala, Dino received the Tally Reese Award for his service and leadership in the community as it relates to his work over the last decade with the McGaw's history. Named for two influential leaders of the McGaw YMCA, this award reflects the legacy and historical significance of the Emerson Street Branch YMCA. James Talley was the first leader of the Emerson Street Branch YMCA, and Bob Reese was McGaw's first African-American board chair and member of the Emerson Street Branch YMCA. So tonight, I am deeply honored to advocate for this well-deserved recognition, and I deeply appreciate this opportunity that you've all provided to me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bill, for your comment. Thank you for your support of Dino's street naming. And Luke, did we get anyone else signed up for public comment before I move forward? I want to make sure I didn't miss anyone.
I'll check 1 second.
Thank you.
Looks like that's it.
Thank you. Items for consideration, HS1. The Parks and Recreation Board recommend adoption of Resolution 14R21, designating the portion of Church Street between Hartree Avenue and Gray Avenue with the honorary street name Morris Dino Robinson Jr. Way. 3 street signs are made for the honoree. 1 sign is installed at each end of the designated 1-block area, and the 3rd sign is given to the honoree. The approximate cost to create all 3 signs is $200, and funds for this program are budgeted in the Public Works Agency. I move this for approval.
Second. Second.
Thank you. It has been moved and seconded. So before I have comment, I wanted to lift up the residents that reached out to also share their support. And I will start with Mary Dow of Lincoln Street in Evanston sends her enthusiastic support. And we have Beth Lang of Davis Street in Evanston also sends her enthusiastic support. We also have Audrey Smith Moy of Heroes member Anti-Racist Task Force in Evanston. Each of these residents send their written support, which I've asked to be included for the record. And Dino, being the historian that he is, will have access to this for his own archives. And I made this request that we would support Dino in naming a street after him for many of the reasons that were already mentioned by Mr. Geiger in his comment, and so many more. I extended a request to the Shorefront Board, and their current chair, Mr. Chip Ratcliffe, prepared a very thorough nominating message, which I am supporting. So Dino, we would be here all day to talk about what he has done, and I also am preparing a written letter for documentation. But he established Shorefront Legacy in the late or mid 90s, and actually incorporated it in early 2000s. His work has been tireless and at his own expense and sacrifice. He has educated our community. He has supported our legislation more recently with historical context and data and information. And he has lifted up the Black experience in Evanston, as well as preserving our rich history as well. He is always available. He shows up and gives us what we need for us to reach our goals in Evanston. And I am grateful. I've had the tremendous pleasure to call on him, not only for our most recent work with the reparation goals, but also with the African American heritage sites and other projects that have been very important. So those that are watching, if you are unfamiliar with Dino Robinson and Shorefront Legacy Museum, I ask that you learn more about the organization and learn more about Black history here in Evanston. It extends beyond Evanston throughout the North Shore, and know that Dino Robinson is the founder, the creator, the innovator, the director, the leader of that movement. And I want to just open it up for any other committee discussion. Alderman Fleming?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, you said it all, but I do want to publicly acknowledge Dino and all his work. And even though Shorefront is alive and standing because of him, I think he does so much more that people probably don't even know about. And so just thank you, Dino, for being committed to the Evanston community. Thank you for being committed to the history of African Americans here in Evanston. And as Alderman Ruth Simmons said, that you started this as a labor of love. Unpaid on your kitchen table, as you've told me. So really, thank you. This is a very small honor, but hopefully one that touches on how much the city appreciates what you've done. And we know so much work is yet to come. And I'm so glad that people have shown interest and visited Shorefront and your work now. So thank you.
Alderman Braithwaite?
Thank you, Alderman Simmons, Alderman Fleming. Brother Dino, congratulations. How fitting to honor the work and legacy that you have created in town, especially with it being the first day of Black History. So congratulations to you, your family, all that you and your board have done, and nothing more but success. So thank you very much, Alderman Simmons, for introducing this.
Thank you. Alderman Ravel?
I would just echo everything that's been said so far, but also add that we were privileged at the 6th and 7th Ward joint meeting that we had last week to hear from Dino and from Alderman Simmons. And I had so many emails after that meeting of people, 7th Ward residents, who were just awed at the information that was presented by both of you, and how much they learned and how much they appreciate the contribution that Dino's made to the community. So I'm really delighted that we're able to do this.
Thank you. And I'll just say lastly that, there are so few ways that we can tangibly show our appreciation for residents and businesses that have made just transformational impact. And this is a small gesture that we have, but really the biggest tangible honor that we can give. And so, Dino, I know you'll watch this one day. I hope that you receive it and know that you have not been taken for granted. We can only imagine that you started with one document and now you have 350 linear feet of archival information, so significant and renowned that you have partnered with the Smithsonian and other national museum institutions. And we are really, really, really privileged and grateful and honored and a better city to have you serving here in Evanston. And I'm proud to call you neighbor in the 5th Ward. So with that, we had a motion and a second from, who seconded? Alderman Fleming? Alderman Fleming, and we can take the roll.
Alderman Braithwaite?
Aye.
Alderman Simmons?
Aye.
Alderman Ravel?
Aye.
Alderman Fleming?
Aye.
Motion passes. Alderman Ravel, will you please take HS2?
Okay. So HS2, staff seeks direction from the Human Services Committee regarding whether or not the City of Evanston should be signatories as amicus curiae, friend of the court, in support of the plaintiff's appellant in the case before the Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals. And this is, I guess, for action.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there a
Yeah,
discussion?
I'll second for discussion if somebody just wants to.
Alderman Fleming has seconded. Is there any discussion?
Yeah,
Alderman
let's get an explanation from staff.
Good evening, Alderwoman Simmons and members of the committee. Nicholas Cummings, Deputy City Attorney, on behalf of HS2. The memorandum attached offers a little bit of an explanation, but to put it in, I guess, plain language, the City of Chicago is looking to file an amicus brief in a case, Schumacher versus Johnson Controls, which was filed in the District of Indiana. The trial court gave an adverse ruling for municipalities, and so the City of Chicago is looking to file an amicus brief in the Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals. And we're asking if the committee and City Council wishes to add Evanston as a signator. The memorandum talks about how the city has used the Recourse Conservation and Recovery Act previously in a case, City of Evanston versus Texaco. And so we feel that the ruling in Indiana could adversely affect our ability to utilize that statute in the future. And we wouldn't necessarily be dedicating any staff time. We would simply just be a signer on behalf of the City of Evanston, similar to another amicus brief we signed out of the state of, I believe it was New York or Pennsylvania, a couple months ago with respect to an amicus brief in the Second Circuit Court of Appeals.
So, normally we have a staff recommendation and you're seeking direction. Is this coming with with your recommendation?
We recommend that we do sign. I think the language should have been like, we're just wanting your authorization.
Okay. Alderman Fleming, did you have comment?
Actually, just had the same question in terms of a staff explanation.
Alderman Braithwaite, did you have anything?
No, Alderman Simmons.
Alderman Ravel?
Well, I felt this was really pretty heavy duty stuff to wade through as somebody who doesn't really, is not familiar with all the subject matter. I guess I had a hard time seeing why the court ruling wasn't in fact an appropriate one. It seems like they've gone to great lengths to eliminate the vapors in the house, and whenever they put in these air mitigation systems, et cetera, and the level of any kind of vapor, or it seems to be just really so minimal as to, I don't know, I guess I'm just having a hard time understanding why this is really such a threat to RCRA. And I don't know, Nick, if you can elaborate on that.
Sure. So from our perspective, with respect to being a municipality, we would have a hard time showing specific harms caused by some of those carcinogens when we actually want to remediate property. So instead, we would like the former standard, which the rest of the country uses, which is the risk of harm as opposed to a showing of specific harm. So as a city, I think it would be difficult for us to say, unless we were filing on behalf of residents, that these specific residents got cancer, for example, as a result of these carcinogens. Instead, as a city, we would rather be able to we wouldn't want to file a complaint that says these carcinogens pose a risk of harm to our residents without having to say a specific risk of harm. And I think that's what the argument, I assume, will be by the City of Chicago at the Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals.
It didn't seem to me, though, that the court was saying that the plaintiffs had to actually show that harm was caused, but rather, I mean, it seemed to me the potential risk of harm was so, so minimal that, I don't know, I guess I just had a hard time seeing how this was going to be disadvantageous to us in the future.
Yeah, the district court opinion in Indiana, I think, required showing actual exposure as opposed to a threat of exposure. And I think that's the difference. We want to be able to argue, or at least if we have to sue someone for contaminating land in Evanston, that there's potential exposure as opposed to actually having to show someone was actually exposed.
So potential exposure, no matter how minimal that exposure might be.
Correct.
So is this then going to go to city council for action? Is that, or just from our committee? What's the?
I believe we need authority from city council to be a signator, so this would go from committee to council. And as far as I know, the city of Chicago has not actually drafted that brief. I think the briefing is still pending. It's just a matter of whether or not we want to be an added signer.
So you'll review the actual brief once it's written and.
Yes.
So before it comes to council, would we have that final feedback and review from you?
Now that I don't know, because I don't know the schedule on which Chicago is writing the brief. And I actually would have to look and see when it's due, the briefing schedule, when it's due. But I don't know if it would be ready for this upcoming city council meeting, for example. It may be March or something like that.
Is there any urgency of time that it makes our next council meeting and not wait until you have feedback on the briefing and then come to a council meeting?
I don't believe that there's, I don't know that it necessarily would, I don't know if it'd be appropriate, I guess, without having read the brief or at least signed onto the brief or at least reviewed the brief, that it would be on this upcoming city council meeting. But
Okay.
I don't know when the Chicago Law Department's appellate division is actually going to crank out a first draft. But I'll find out.
So 2 questions. In hearing what sounds like concerns from Alderman Revelle, waiting to get that feedback from the brief, do you have any recommendation for us against holding it until a future council meeting when you can give us feedback on the brief?
I have no recommendation on that. I think that if the committee if we want to hold it in committee until that draft is completed, I think that that's appropriate.
Okay. Looks like that was for action. So Alderman Revelle, if that's something that you're interested in, would you make a motion?
Okay, so we could hold it in committee and wait to see what the brief actually says.
Yes.
Without messing up the timing, because I don't want to hold it so long that we miss whatever deadline there is at the appellate court.
Give me 1 second. I can maybe actually get you the briefing schedule. It's actually not.
Posted.
It's actually not as readily available as I thought. So I'd have to look and see what the briefing schedule says, but I don't believe that the decision actually just came down in August. So I'd have to find out what the appellate docket says with respect to its and if you want to maybe table it to the end of the meeting and I can have an answer for you if you'd like.
Okay, yeah. Why don't we do that?
Is there any formal action we need to take to table it to the end of the meeting? Can we just keep going and come back to it, or what do we need to do for that, Nick?
Someone can move that it be tabled, and then by the end of the meeting, it would need to be taken off the table, and I'll speak up before we adjourn the meeting so it doesn't just fall away.
Don't let us forget.
I'll move that we table item HS2 till the last item on our agenda.
Second.
Alderman Braithwaite,
Aye.
Alderman Simmons,
Aye.
Alderman Ravel,
Aye.
Alderman Fleming.
Aye.
Thank you. Item is held. And Alderman Braithwaite, are you able to get HS3?
Sure, Madam Chair, I'd like to move item HS3, Resolution 20-R-21, authorizing the city manager to enter into a First Amendment to volunteer the animal organization agreement. It's for action.
Second.
Is there any discussion?
Okay, Alderman Braithwaite. Alderman Braithwaite. Should we come back to him? Alderman
Yes.
Simmons,
Aye.
Alderman Ravel,
Aye.
Alderman Fleming,
Aye.
Alderman Braithwaite.
Aye, sorry, my mic wouldn't unmute.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Motion passes. Alderman Braithwaite, will you also take HS4?
Yes, give me one moment just to get back to my agenda.
Actually, here's Alderman Rainey's. I didn't see her. She just popped up on my screen. Alderman Rainey, are you able to take HS4?
She's not a member of the committee, but
Oh, no? Okay. Thank you. Then we'll wait, Alderman Braithwaite.
I'll be quick. Sorry about that.
No problem.
And now I'm completely out of the agenda. Go ahead.
Nope.
Someone else.
Alderman Fleming, will you take HS4?
Sure. HS4 is Resolution 21-R-21, authorizing the city manager to enter into a First Amendment to the grant agreement with Evanston Animal Shelter Association. This amendment outlines a new distribution of grant funds and extends to the term of the grant agreement through June 1st, 2036. This is for action.
Second.
All right. It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion for HS4?
Alderman Braithwaite,
Aye.
Alderman Simmons,
Aye.
Alderman Ravel,
Aye.
Alderman Fleming.
Aye.
Did I miss someone?
Nope, that is it. Motion passes. Alderman Braithwaite, are you?
Yeah, my agenda's back up.
Okay.
You want me to read items for discussion?
I'm sorry. Items for discussion.
Yep.
HS1, Alderman Braithwaite, please.
Sure, yes, Madam Chair. So it's Illinois HB 3653, Criminal Justice Reform on Buzz. Staff is recommending that our Human Services Committee review and discuss item HB 3653, which was passed by Illinois House and Senate of January 13th and is awaiting the signature of Governor Pritzker to become state law.
Do we need to take any action on a discussion item? Or can
It
we?
might be helpful, Alderman Simmons, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, Alderman Braithwaite.
No, you said it. I was looking forward to hearing.
Yeah, I was saying.
Yeah.
I was getting there. So it sounds like we don't need to take any action, and we are inviting a staff report. Is there a staff presentation or report for this?
Yes, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Chief Cook. Thank you for being here tonight. We are inviting you up for presentation.
Yes, ma'am, and thank you, Chairman Simmons, all of the aldermen. Good evening, and the general public. We're here to talk about some very important legislation. It came down from Illinois General Assembly. It's House Bill 3653, which was authored by the Legislative Black Caucus. It was approved by the Illinois General Assembly, bringing significant changes to things like police training policies, police accountability, transparency in law enforcement, and the rights of defendants, detainees, and prisoners. And this is according to Senator L.G. Sims Jr., who sponsored the bill. The Evanston Police Department has been very proactive with the implementation of police reform measures within our department prior to the George Floyd incident. It's been my goal to be proactive in bringing about better police service, comprehensive reform in our department. And I'd like to give you all a few of the things to substantiate what I'm saying. Supervisory training at Northwestern University School of Staff and Command and Executive Management. We felt it was important to train up our management team. This training at Northwestern gives them the critical decision-making skills needed to better manage officers on the street. It gives them better de-escalation skills and strategies. It provides them with a framework for positive problem solving and community engagement. The department is committed to critical incident training, as more than half of our 149 officers have received this training. And that training, critical incident training, provides our police officers with the ability and skills to deal with people that are in crisis, having mental illness, and things of that nature. We've also been committed to research and interpersonal communications and how we do citizen engagement. We achieved this with the assistance of former Northwestern University PhD and Evanston Police Department interns, Dr. Andrea Dittman. She's currently now a professor at Emory University, and Dr. Kyle Dobson. He is a professor at the University of Texas at Austin. These two outstanding Northwestern students were interns here at the Evanston Police Department, and they looked at how we interacted with the public on calls, and their research was centered around bringing better processes for us to interact with the public. And we're slated in the near future next week to sit down, and they're going to go over their research paper with us, and they'll be providing that to us, and that will give us better insight on our interpersonal skills with the general public. We've conducted a review of the Evanston Police Department's use of force policy with the assistance of the N3 at Northwestern University. That is the Northwestern Neighborhood and Network Initiative. Dr. Andrew Papachristos is the faculty director, and attorney Soledad McGrath is the executive director who conducted our interviews and reviews. What they did was we looked at our use of force policy in a post-George Floyd environment, and we asked the university to provide us with guidance on how we could make our policy more public friendly and how we could be proactive in moving forward with how we utilize force. Dr. Papachristos is the leading sociologist in America on violence, crime, and use of force. So we're very lucky to be in a town with such an astute staff who, by the way, provided all of these services to the Evanston Police Department free of charge. And they have been committed to furthering our policies and making them more conducive for the environment that we live in the law enforcement community today. The Illinois Association of Chiefs of Police, which manages the Illinois Law Enforcement Accreditation Program, ILEAP, certified that the Evanston Police Department meets the federal use of force eligibility requirements as set forth by the U.S. Department of Justice. So after we received our review and our updates from the University at Northwestern, we had to submit those findings in our general orders to the ILEAP program because we were in the midst of doing accreditation for our police department. And as many of you all may know, that after we received the report on our use of force from Dr. Papa Christos and Ms. McGrath, we did receive recognition from President Barack Obama for the Evanston Police Department being proactive in taking the lead on bringing clarity to the public with respect to how we use force, and that has been nothing but positive. We've gotten many requests from other law enforcement agencies in America on what we did. We have submitted what we did to those other agencies. And if you look at what is proposed with respect to use of force that is in House Bill 3653, you'll see that many of the things that we have in our general orders with respect to use of force and the recommendations that came down from Northwestern University N3 Policy Center, they're pretty much the same. And I was amazed when I saw the House bill by Senator Sims and how it basically mirrored what Evanston had already done with respect to the use of force. We've implemented the Evanston Police Department Community Forum and the Evanston Police Department Youth Community Forum, and those committees arose out of the need to have more public input in what we do here at the police department. And being involved in District 202, being invited to some of the STEM programs over there, I recognize that we have some really high quality students here in town, and who better can provide a look and an intake on what they think is important for the police department to be doing. So those two programs were started. These committees were researched and organized by the Evanston Police Department's problem-solving team, and also with Mr. David Cherry, who was sent here by Mayor Haggerty, and he's an Evanston resident, and he worked with us to formulate these two communities. They did the research. They went to Chicago Police to see how they did with the district advisory committees, and also the YDAC, which is the Youth District Advisory Committee. And we're implementing a similar community gathering programs here with those two programs. The Illinois Association of Chiefs of Police, which are managed by the Illinois Law Enforcement Accreditation Program, certified that our use of force policy is in line with the federal guidelines. And that was also required for us to participate in the ILEAP accreditation program. On January 22nd of 2021, the Evanston Police Department completed the Tier 2 level accreditation process of the Illinois Law Enforcement Accreditation Program. And Friday, we received a letter of confirmation from the Illinois Law Enforcement Accreditation Program and a recommendation that the Evanston Police Department be accredited. I had a conversation with incoming president of the Illinois Association of Chiefs of Police, Chief Mitch Davis from Hazel Crest, and he wanted to thank the Evanston Police Department publicly when they come here to do the presentation for the award, which will be sometime in April. We've had, we've had many complaints about how information is disseminated, how to be transparent with our information, and that kind of sprung out of the manual process that we were using to put information out to the public on our dashboard. But we have been working with Esri, Police Transparency Solutions, and we're going to be implementing a computer-based dashboard that will feed that dashboard straight out of our in-house computer systems. So you will get real-time information. That information will be on arrests, use of force incidents, citizen complaints, and things of that nature. You can look things up by race, location, and a number of other variables. So it's going to be a really good thing in terms of presenting a more transparent process. And as we implement that, we'll be taking, certainly be taking requests on additional things that we can add to that dashboard. And last year we completed 51 Evanston Police Department Citizen Police Academy classes. This was our 51st class. It is a long-standing program in the Evanston Police Department. I recommend that people in the public take advantage of that because you can come into the police department and get exposed to actually how we do things, have conversation with police officers, and question why we do things in a particular way. So we'll be starting up class number 52 next month. So anybody interested in that can call Anjali Daly in the problem-solving team of the Evanston Police Department. Now that's just to give you a few things to show you that during the pandemic, the Evanston police personnel around here have been working diligently to implement these processes here and to bring transparency and to bring about change from the old way of doing business to what is progressive and what is new. And we're working with some very astute people in our town right here from Evanston to help us bring about those changes. So the next part of the presentation will be done by Deputy Chief Jody Wright, and he'll be going over specific aspects of the House bill, and we'll take questions about anything after he finishes. Can you all see the screen?
No, we cannot. And if he was speaking, we can't hear either.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the committee. If I could share my screen. I don't know if I need permission.
Luke, do we need to give some host privileges so that he can share a screen? Or?
To my knowledge, he has permission. Can you guys try again?
All right, can you guys see it?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the committee. So what I'm going to do is just extract some of the things from this House bill. The bill was about 550 pages printed. But what I tried to do is extract some items from the bill that I thought members of the community, as well as the council, would be interested in. So what I did have about 10 slides that I'm going to go through briefly on some new legislation and also some revisions to current legislation. Before I get started, what I didn't put on here was a provision for body-worn cameras that the state is going to mandate for all agencies, police agencies within the state of Illinois. This is going to be implemented year to year based on the size of the department, with the largest departments, 1 million or more, being required to be full implementation with body-worn cameras as of January 1, 22, and giving those with a smaller municipality and police force the flexibility of being full implementation by January 1 of 2025. I didn't put that on the slide because I'm sure you guys are aware, and also members of the community, and we've been full implementation with body-worn cameras here in Evanston since 2017. And obviously with the new legislative, once this passed, there's no turning back from there. So that will be for the future for us. In addition, what I didn't put on here was the elimination of cash bails, and they're now imposing what's called pretrial release. That is still, we're still waiting for direction from the Chief Judge's office and the State's Attorney's office on what that pretrial release and those procedures are going to look like. So there was a proposal to eliminate cash bail and implement pretrial release. As it relates to here in Evanston, what I thought would be interesting for the public to know, and also members of the council, is new legislation starting on this slide, which stipulates that police misconduct records, and this is both public and non-public records that are related to complaints, investigations, and also adjudication of police misconduct, shall be permanently maintained. And the reason why I want to highlight public and non-public, because public misconduct records are those DIs and CRs, but now any internal non-public misconduct is included in this legislation. Like I said, this is new legislation or revision to the Local Records Act. This takes effect January 1 of 2023, and the previous regulations required or allow for police departments to rid those misconducts based on the Retention Act, which is approximately 4 years for most minor misconducts. But now, according to this new statute, we'll be keeping everything related to police misconduct. I'm sorry, Alderman Braithwaite.
Man, I'm sorry. I was listening and paying attention. So in terms of, would that include video and the other things that you record when you say all records?
I don't think so. I think that the Video Retention Act is spelled out in another statute, but I didn't see that in the House Bill 3653. It's already legislation on how we must retain video, and I haven't seen any additional mandates as to what was previously put out when video cameras went into effect.
Sure, Chief. And I guess the reason for my question, and I have a little bit of brain fog, so excuse me if I'm not asking this the correct way. My understanding with police video, that there's a timeline with how long that we keep all of those videos on file. In addition to that, there is, and this is something that Luke can speak to maybe as well, we always have a matter of capacity and space. So when I read that, what jumped out to me is that you're going to hold on to those records and they don't get deleted, period.
Yeah,
So that's what I'm trying to have.
Yeah,
Go ahead, Commander.
The legislation applies to the Local Records Act, which is our retention schedule. So as that relates to police misconduct, there is the Body-Worn Camera Act that covers the retention of police videos. But that act talks about or regulates videos, whether it deals with misconduct, whether it deals with an arrest, or whether it deals with just a regular citizen contact. this is specifically focused on misconduct. So to answer your question, right now, any files that we have that relates to police misconduct, we're required to keep those. So if a video is part of that file that's related to police misconduct, as long as we have that file, then we should be retaining that video, is the way I read the act.
Yeah, yeah. So hopefully we don't have too many of them. Thank you for your response.
In case we can retain that video for as long as possible.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you.
All right. And then moving on to bullet 2, this is Illinois Police Training Act, and this is new legislation which requires statewide minimum standards regarding mental health screenings for both probationary police officers and permanent police officers. So, like I said, this is a new law which is going to mandate regular mental health screenings for probationary and permanent police officers. Right now, we have no legislation that requires any police officer to do any type of mental health screening that is a permanent police officer, outside of any misconduct, which may lead the department to send them for a fit for duty evaluation. Prior to employment, we do send individuals for psychological evaluations, but with this new legislation, this will be ongoing evaluations for both permanent and probationary police officers.
So this Illinois Police Training Act has a lot of unfunded mandates attached to it, such as what the deputy just spoke about with the psychological evaluations and how we send people to get evaluated.
Next one is rules and standards for schools. So schools is the police academy. This is new legislation also that's requiring a minimum of 30 hours of training, both in the police academy and also continuous in-service training. Those 30 hours must have at least 12 hours of hands-on scenario-based training. Out of that, you have to have 6 hours of instructions on use of force, including de-escalation, specific training on officer safety techniques, including cover and concealment, and an additional 6 hours focused on high-risk traffic stops. Like I said, this is a new standard to the police academy, and there's also a new in-service training standard that we will have to put on the schedule and do a minimum of 30 hours every 3 years of additional training.
Nice, very nice.
This also adds legislation that requires Alderman Fleming.
Yeah, thank you. This bottom part before you move on about this, maybe you're getting ready to talk about this
Oh.
mental health and crisis intervention training.
Yeah, so this is new legislation also, and emergency medical response training certification, crisis intervention, officer wellness, and mental health to a list of minimum in-service training requirements. So right now, you have in-service training requirements that are regulated by the Illinois Training and Standards Board. This adds the emergency medical response training and also mental health and officer wellness, and including crisis intervention every year now. So it used to be where you're required to do some of this training, but it wasn't mandated that it was done every year. Now these are mandated trainings that we have to cover in service every year moving forward.
Okay, and this one doesn't have a date effective as the other one did. So is the assumption once the governor, if the governor signs this, they will then tell you when these are implemented? The other one I think was like 2023.
Right. So anything that doesn't have a provision for implementation is due to take effect July 1, 2021, assuming the governor signs the bill with no modifications to it.
Alderman, in our 2021 goals, that is one of the goals that are listed for the Evanston Police Department for 2021. And it was prior to this legislation coming out. The mental health and the wellness of the police officer. What was also very striking in this legislation is now there'll be the requirement for the psychological examination. That legislation came up probably about 5 years ago, and it never made it through to the Senate. But now it's in this legislation, which is a good thing.
All right, moving on to the next slide, just covers our mandatory monthly reporting. So as of July 1, 2021, we'll have to report any incidents where a law enforcement officer was dispatched to deal with the person experiencing a mental health crisis or incident, including the number of incidents we'll have to report, the law enforcement response, and the outcome for that incident. So that's one additional report we'll have to do monthly. Second one is a report on use of force, including any action that resulted in death or serious bodily injury of a person or the discharge of a firearm at the direction of a person. So these are two new monthly reporting requirements that we'll have to undertake. This is the Police and Community Relations Improvement Act. This is just a few of the bullets that were contained in that act. The first one states that it should not be a requirement for a person filing a complaint against a sworn police officer to have a complaint supported by a sworn affidavit of other legal documentation. This is something that we've talked about in previous years at HSC. When it comes to police complaints, the requirement to have a sworn affidavit or have that complaint supported by a sworn affidavit. This has been taken out of the revision to state statute that takes that out of the police officer's Bill of Rights. But I just want to mention that here in Evanston, as you know, with the submission of DIs to HSC every month, that we have for years taken complaints without the filing of a sworn affidavit in most circumstances. This also states that this ban on the affidavit requirement shall apply to any collective bargaining agreements entered on or before after January 1, 2023. So what that's stating is that you have the Uniform Police Officers Disciplinary Act, which is the Police Officers Bill of Rights. This language is in there. This language is coming out of that statute as of January 1, 2023. But also you have some municipalities who have this language in their collective bargaining agreements. So any collective bargaining agreements entered into after January 1, 2023, they will no longer be able to put this language into a collective bargaining agreement. As it stands now, we don't have this language in any of our collective bargaining agreements. We just honor or enforce this or apply it based on the state statute.
DC, can I just ask a quick question just for comparison with our other suburbs? I guess I've always known this as common practice. I just don't know, is this something that other municipalities have in place as part of the complaint process, or are we unique in what we're doing, seeing that we're ahead of the curve here?
So most municipalities, if you want to go and you want to file a complaint, they're going to require that sworn affidavit. And I remember we've had these discussions before at Human Services. In Evanston, we do require a sworn affidavit for some, but we will take a complaint if we know the complainant's identity, if we have information that more than likely there was an interaction that needs to be looked into, we will take that complaint without a sworn affidavit. We've gone so far as to look into police misconduct, and if we couldn't get a sworn affidavit, we would have the chief of police make that an internal complaint or an internal investigation, and then the chief would sign off as the affiant or would sign the sworn affidavit, theoretically. So we have been for years taking complaints without having it supported by a sworn affidavit, as long as we can determine that there is some substance or merit to the complaint.
Sure.
And one of the reasons why this type of legislation came down is a lot of departments will require an affidavit to be sworn and not have any notaries in their police department. So they'll give the person the paperwork to file a complaint and tell them they got to go to a currency exchange somewhere and get it notarized. As the chief said, we got at least 15 notaries. I'm a notary myself so that I can do what Deputy Chief Wright just spoke of in our conversation. So I am really happy that you could just come in and file a complaint without having to go through a lot of hassle.
No, that's a good call out. Thank you very much, DC and Chief Cook.
All right, moving on. So Illinois Municipal Code, and I put the statute there. This has been a topic of conversation just since this past summer with all of the protests that have been going on across the U.S. And this states that or prohibits police department from requesting or receiving any specified equipment from any military surplus program. If a police department does request the property from such a program, the department shall publish notice of the request on a publicly accessible website maintained by the department or the municipality within 14 days of the request. This was, I know, a topic over the summer with the mayor's Q&A about the police use of military equipment. So this was written into the statute to prohibit certain types of equipment. The equipment I didn't put on there, but it's what the statute covers is those extreme pieces of equipment like track tanks, armored tanks, grenade launchers, things of that nature. I did put the statute for reference, but here in Evanston, we don't have it purchased or requested any equipment of that nature from any military surplus program at all to this date.
If you were to request any of that equipment from the law enforcement surplus office, the request and review for that type of equipment goes to the military and is usually at the highest ranking level of the military that's in our region. And they normally deny it, those requests for those track tanks and armored vehicles, unless it's a SWAT team and you can prove that you have a need for it. Other than that, they tell the person to put in an urban area security initiative grant or a URASI grant and see how it shakes out on the federal government on that side in terms of a grant. And that's usually done on a regional basis. You know, these SWAT teams, NIPAS, South Suburban Emergency Response Team, those are all regional entities that serve multiple communities.
So, Chief, can I ask a real silly question? I guess in a crisis situation, it would be great to have 14 days to have this published, but that doesn't mean that you have to wait 14 days to get whatever your request is, just that it has to be posted. Am I reading this correctly?
Yeah, but if you're doing it the right way, anytime you request some of this type of equipment, you would bring it to your city council.
Sure. Okay, thank you.
And the last bullet on this slide just speaks about Illinois driver's licenses. So no later than January 1 of this year, the Secretary of State is going to be required to rescind licenses that were suspended for non-payment of fines And those fines include automated traffic enforcement fines and abandoned vehicle fines. So anyone who had their license suspended, just basically, just based on what we call financial responsibility or the inability to pay a fine, their license statuses will be rescinded. And other than there's anything that the license was suspended for other than financial, they'll be re-implemented. Prohibited use of force. Use of force as punishment or retaliation was written into the use of force statute. Discharge of kinetic impact projectiles, which are rubber bullets or other non or less lethal projectiles. Discharge of firearms and kinetic impact projectiles indiscriminately into a crowd, and use of chemical agents and like substances prior to issuing in order to disperse. And that order to disperse must be followed by sufficient time and space to allow compliance. We don't own any kinetic impact projectiles, rubber bullets, so we won't have any issues there. And our use of force policy right now currently advises the officers that before any use of force is used, prior to that use of force, if you can give a warning that you should, that's already written into our policy. But this just goes to strengthen the use of force statute mandated by the state of Illinois. Alderman Fleming?
Yeah, I'm not arguing whether it was or not, but I know this was one of the complaints that folks had around the Northwestern NIPAS interaction. So just for the record, this would also apply to NIPAS?
Yes, ma'am. And NIPAS complies with this already. And when we're on the scene of a protest and it's determined that violence is about to take place and they give a dispersal order, that is tagged via our communication system, meaning that the commander has the dispatchers log that the dispersal order was given, and then that is relayed to the crowd via loudspeaker, and they are given sufficient time to comply.
Okay.
So is pepper spray considered under a chemical agent?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
So any use of chemicals or kinetic energy devices have to come with a warning, and the people have to be given an opportunity to peacefully disperse. Sometimes that takes a little longer than usual. I haven't seen in any of the task force I've dealt with, either north or south, where they say if they don't leave in 5 minutes, we're gonna do X. They usually will give a lot more time for the crowd to disperse.
All right, and these next two will cover the duty to render aid and the duty to intervene, both related to use of force. The duty to render aid statute states now that all law enforcement officers must render aid if they determine a person is injured, whether as a result of a use of force or otherwise. And the aid and assistance should be consistent with training. And there's also a requirement to request emergency medical assistance if necessary. The duty to intervene, a peace officer shall have an affirmative duty to intervene to prevent, stop another police officer in his or her presence from using any unauthorized force. And this goes without doesn't distinguish between ranks. So it doesn't indemnify you if the person outraged you. This is for any peace officer working in that capacity. If you see another police officer using force which is unacceptable or not proper, you're required to intervene regardless of the rank or the chain of command.
And one thing that I would like for the public to know, out of our interaction with the N3 Policy Center, and in the report that they issued on our use of force, it was recommended, and I thoroughly agree, and we will be implementing that into our order, that with the duty to intercede should come protection from the person that is interceding or being the whistleblower. So we're gonna have a section in there that will make it a rule violation for any police officer to harass or intimidate a person who intervened in an unlawful action by a citizen.
Yeah.
And
Good
then,
stuff.
I'm sorry?
No, I just said good stuff. You know, I'm reflecting on the situation that, one of many situations that turned our nation upside down with George Floyd. I think this just puts a very clear statement that it will not be tolerated within our Evanston Police Department. So thank you.
All right, and then the last slide I'm going to cover is the official misconduct. So these 3 bullets were added to the official misconduct statute. And it basically states that if you misrepresent or fail to provide facts describing an incident in any report or doing any investigation regarding a law enforcement officer's conduct, that you can be charged with misconduct, or withholding information or the misrepresentation of another law enforcement officer from a supervisor, you can be charged with, held accountable and charged with official misconduct. We've had in our rules and regulations or our prohibited conduct that any officer that was found to be misrepresenting the facts or lying in internal investigation, they're subject to termination. But now this official misconduct statute incorporates that that language, saying that if you are found to be lying in an internal investigation or any misconduct investigation, that is grounds for a charge of official misconduct by the state. And I'm going to stop sharing now. That is it for the presentation. Are there any additional questions?
Alderman Fleming?
Thank you. I don't really have a question, just my suggestion or my hope is that if this is signed into law and before it goes into effect, that we would have some kind of community meeting, or, at the least some kind of, update and mass email to let people know what the changes are, even if there are things that we've already been doing, so that people are aware that we are mindful and keeping up with state law and how we're going to implement.
Yes, ma'am. This is a preliminary deal. The Illinois Association of Chiefs of Police is having a meeting this week in order to iron out some of the things that are creating conflict between the Illinois Chiefs and the Illinois General Assembly. And I was on the Noble meeting last week, which is the National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Executives. And Senator Sims was on, he was the premier speaker that day. And he talked about, bringing forth this legislation in good faith. He's concerned about how the public has been treated in the past. And he thought it was a great thing to move us forward. There are some issues that are minor in my estimation that need to be worked out. And I think it's, if not now, when do we bring forth change in law enforcement? So we'll certainly be bringing back conversation in the future about some of the new changes when they get the final report done.
Thank you.
Is there any other discussion from the committee? Does that conclude your report and presentation?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And we have Alderman Fleming, will you take HS2, please?
Yeah, HS2 is an update from the Alternative Emergency Response Subcommittee with the recommendations for potential framework for the City of Evanston's new alternative to emergency response program model. Just for discussion. And there are some committee members here that are turning their cameras on here, I believe. They are going to lead us through the overview of the memo, if that's okay, Madam Chair, and then we can have our discussion.
That'll be fine. Thank you.
All right, so we have all of the committee chair, maybe not all the committee, but several of the committee members are here. So Maureen McDonald and Kristen Kennard will be giving us kind of the overview of our framework. And then Ms. Evangeline Seamark, who's also on the committee, will be introducing a speaker who is kind of a subject matter expert who can share his knowledge of this type of program framework for us. So we don't have a screen share or anything, they're just going to be speaking.
Thank you, Alderman Fleming. Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Chair Simmons and committee members for having us. My name is Kristen Kennard. I am a member of the subcommittee, as well as the Director of Social Work Services and Deputy Director at the Moran Center in Evanston. So I'm just going to give a brief overview. I know you all have the memo, but of what we've been doing for these last few months and our initial recommendations. There's still a lot of logistics and whatnot to be figured out, but we wanted to come back to you all with where we are at so far and get feedback from you all. So we've been meeting weekly as a subcommittee for the last 3 months. And during that time, we've spent reviewing other cities and places all over the country that have already implemented models similar to what we were hoping to do, but obviously we will make it specific to Evanston. We've also spent time inviting experts and other organizations within Evanston and outside of Evanston to come speak with us about things that are already existing so that we, one, don't double dip, but so that we're able to use our resources that we already have when trying to put together the framework for this. So we have talked with AMITA's crisis response 24/7 line. We've talked with AMITA and Evanston Fire Department about their ECHO program. We've talked to the Evanston Mental Health Task Force, Trilogy's community outreach, and Threshold's community outreach. We spoke with the City of Evanston's victim advocates, as well as the Youth and Young Adult program. And then we've spent a lot of time reviewing Eugene, Oregon's CAHOOTS model, which is something similar to what we were looking to replicate here, as well as Olympia, Washington's crisis response unit. So we were given in the beginning of all of this a $200,000 budget. So based on all of the people that we met with and the data we reviewed, we were also reviewed and analyzed 911 data and the protocols that are currently in place. These are the recommendations, the very basic beginning steps of the recommendations that we will be making. And we are also looking for additional funding from Evanston's Mental Health Board using the new equity model as well. So initially, to start off with staffing, we are recommending that we have 2 master's level clinically licensed mental health, behavioral health professionals. Their education, obviously, experience and skill set in being able to de-escalate and handle crisis situations would benefit in conjunction with having 2 peer support staff. And so it is best practices to include individuals who have lived experience in some of the issues that we may be talking about or maybe encountering on the streets. And so between the 2 master's level licensed clinicians and 2 peer support staff, it is our hope that between the clinical knowledge and the educational experience, as well as people who have vast knowledge of the community, individuals who have lived experience with mental health issues, substance abuse issues, homelessness issues, and can actually relate, that will help people who are in crisis in the moment and who need these responses to be able to build more trust and better rapport on a moment's notice. You're going to be meeting people that you have no idea who they are, and so between having those two things together, it's our hope that would be the best team approach. We would recommend that they respond in teams, one mental health professional with one peer staff. And all of these people would be responsible for outreach, follow-up, and support services beyond the initial call that they are called to. So in the days and the weeks following, setting up individuals with appropriate supports and whatnot. So as hopefully they won't have to continue having these emergency responses. It is our recommendation also that the peer support should not respond alone, that there should always be a licensed clinical individual responding with a peer staff. Moving into the kind of city staff versus contractual. So we've thought a lot about how to make this work within the city of Evanston. Because of funding limitations, mostly we have discussed a hybrid model with city staff and contractual, and what that would ultimately look like, or what we are recommending. Contractual staff would be more affordable due to the city's union salaries and benefits and pensions. For a licensed mental health professional, the range for a salary would be somewhere between $76,000 and about $95,000, and that 8% pension and benefits would be about $16,000. So if we're recommending 2 licensed staff, that's the majority of our budget right there. And so we would be making a recommendation that we contract out to other places that are already doing something similar. So as I said, we met with Trilogy and Thresholds, and due to not-for-profit salaries being much lower and much less, it would be much more cost-effective to hire or to contract out for the licensed professionals. But we think it is really important ultimately for this to all fall under a city public health programming. And so we think it's really important that those peer support staff would be hired for city staff. And one, to keep that connection there, and we have something housed under the city, also to help in regards to oversight and making sure accountability, but also who's reporting to who within the city. For the salary wise for the peer support staff, given the city union pay ranges, that would be somewhere between $54,000 and $68,000 plus pension and benefits. And so again, it would be our recommendation to contract out for 2 licensed clinical mental health professionals and hire through the city, hire 2 peer support staff. We recognize that can make it difficult for reporting structure, having the contractual or having a hybrid model of both. But it is our hope that as we move forward and we're able to have more detailed conversations with city staff as well as anybody we would potentially contract with, that we would be able to make that happen. We would have to be, I think, very clear about who is reporting to who, and the importance of accountability and transparency for residents as well as within the city, knowing what is going on with the contractual partner. I think that we all believe that is absolutely pertinent in order for this to be effective. So the call response, we are making a recommendation that this is not a co-responder model. So police officers would not be responding with this team of 2. It would be our recommendation that they have access to. We had talked about with Chris Voss from dispatch and whatnot, potentially having a radio so that if something does go wrong, I know there's a big fear around if something escalates, which is always a possibility. A lot of the interviews and the reporting and whatnot that we've gotten, we really learned that oftentimes it's opposite, that police have been calling not-for-profit agencies, Connections with the Homeless. I get calls, things like that, to respond to things that they're initially sent out to do, more so often than not-for-profit and people who are responding to internal crisis calls from their clients reaching out for police officers. So it would be our hope that, and crucial for this, that this team would have a direct connection to EPD and EFD in case that they are needed, but that it would just be the team of two, and always the team of two. It would never be a peer support staff or just the mental health staff going out on their own. But that it would not be a co-responder model. And our thoughts behind that are exactly that if somebody is in mental health distress and dealing with mental health issues, substance abuse issues, and whatnot, oftentimes it could be the most amazing officer that there is, and we have plenty of those in Evanston, but oftentimes just the sight of an armed individual can automatically agitate and escalate, and also give the idea to somebody who is in crisis or those around them that might all automatically mean facing arrest. And so we believe that it's important for the people who are trained in these things, and again have this lived experience through the peer piece, if they are able to respond and de-escalate the situation and do what would be needed with that. In regards to program hours, we looked at 911 data, and from some 911 data, let me make that clear. And from that, what it looks like, the types of calls that this team would be responding to are most often happening in the later afternoon and into the evenings. Again, with our budget, we don't have enough right now to have 24 hours covered 7 days a week. But to start off with, we would recommend that it's somewhere from like that 2 to 10 or 3 to 11 time frame. That's also when a lot of other community organizations that people might rely on are closed going into those evening hours, and so they're not able to access support that they may have otherwise if those places are open. We haven't talked logistics yet, but we've thought through in order to reach this team and how that looks. You know, it could be through 911, and the dispatch would be hopefully trained, which I'll talk about in a second, on how to field those calls. But also, we've also talked about, is there potentially a way to get another small number that people would just know off the top of their heads? Oh, I call 911 in emergency. If it's a mental health type crisis and whatnot, I can call 511. I'm just making up numbers, but if that would be potentially an option too, so that it would be quick and easy. We believe, it's our recommendation, it's incredibly important that given the growing number of non-English speaking citizens in Evanston, that at least one of the licensed professionals speaks Spanish. And it's our recommendation that it would be ideal that also a second person out of those 4 that were hired speaks the second language as well. It's really important that the individuals that are hired have experience in working with diverse populations and understanding and recognizing the barriers, whether they're perceived or they're real. It doesn't really matter if they're perceived, that's what's happening, to accessing services, and also stigmas around mental health services and getting help for those things. And for the entire team, it's important, and coming into it would be great, but also, training as they begin. It's really important on opportunity for people to know the opportunities for financial support, for care in critical times. People who are not able to access supports because of their financial situations. This team needs to have a very good idea of what is accessible for those who cannot pay, who may not have insurance, and different things like that. So being connected to the community is really important, and that's where we're really hopeful that one of the peer support staff are people who are extremely familiar, with Evanston and the community. In regards to training, we would recommend that EPD's 911 dispatch staff was trained by Cahoots, which is the program in Eugene. And they already are doing those things. And from what we know and are finding more out about, they're doing them virtually. I know Chris Voss had talked about, it can be difficult to get everybody trained in person just because of staffing and whatnot. They're already doing this for many other communities and virtually. So it would be our recommendation to have that. They already have a lot of training in these calls. I know they already send out crisis intervention trained officers and whatnot, but with a whole new program involved in figuring out which calls come in and who to send 911 emergency responders to versus this new team. Cahoots is, again, probably one of the best places to talk to in regards to the training for that. These teams, the licensed professionals as well as the peer staff, will also be offered appropriate training, which we'll talk more again with Cahoots and other programs about as we move forward and what's appropriate. And ideally that training will be paid for using other funds other than the $200,000 in the budget that we have. Community education is a big piece of this. As we get it up and running, we obviously want all the Evanston community residents to know about this program, to know what its goals are, to know when it's appropriate to either ask for, again, if we have a separate number to call this, which is 911. And so it's our recommendation that the city launch a citywide multi-language, campaign just to educate the Evanston community residents, as well as not-for-profit organizations and resources that we have within Evanston, because ultimately the partnership between this program and the staff in this program and Evanston Police Department, Evanston Fire Department, and the organizations within Evanston, in order for it to be effective, everybody's going to have to be, working together and functioning together. And once this team responds to the initial crisis, their job is going to be to help find resources and support for those individuals. And that's where our, Evanston is filled with, and we all know that, many not-for-profit organizations and organizations that can help, but that education piece of it and making sure those partners are ready and willing and knowing kind of how this all works is going to be crucial in making all of this work. So with all of that, I'm going to pass it over to Maureen and let her talk. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kristen, for really condensing, many months worth of work on behalf of many people into such a concise presentation. I appreciated, very much kind of where the request for an alternative 911 response comes from in the community, and also the many goals. Right? There's a lot of potential wins in taking on something like this, in terms of less of an armed officer response when it's safe to not have an armed officer response, but also to really engage people who are in crisis in the next step. And one thing that we know at Peer Services from dealing with people who are in crisis, lots of people with substance use disorders find themselves in the hospital if they're acutely intoxicated, or they find themselves arrested. And once the immediate crisis has passed, it's like, oh, okay, that's over. Now I can go back to doing what I was doing before, even if it's really not working for them and the other people in their lives. And so having the people who are meeting the crisis be really tooled to help people make that immediate bridge, to identify their own goals for why they may want to pursue some different courses of action. We think that gives everyone who will be met by this team a real shot at maybe making it past that immediate crisis moment, and actually being able to take up the many resources that exist in Evanston that could be made available to them. And so that's one of our big hopes here, is also that we can help engage family members. This kind of a response that bridges the immediate crisis gives that opportunity. So I just wanted to add sort of my own thoughts from Peer's perspective about why we think this has so much value for the community. And I will hand off to Evangeline for the next part.
All right, thank you. My name is Evangeline Seamark, pronouns she, her, and I'm here tonight as a subcommittee member and also longtime resident of Evanston's 8th Ward. I'm a survivor of multiple forms of violence, including my son Yaquez's murder here in Evanston in 2018. I'm really honored to be a member of this subcommittee because I believe survivors need to be at the table when plans about public safety are being considered, as we've been the most harmed and the least served in our communities, especially young and Black and Brown survivors. So as part of my advocacy work with other survivors in Cook County and across the state, I've had the great fortune to connect with advocates like our guest tonight. I'm incredibly honored to introduce Arturo Carrillo, who is an expert in the realm of shared safety and community mental health. Dr. Carrillo is here tonight representing the Collaborative for Community Wellness in Chicago. He will share a brief overview of the treatment not trauma alternative response model that his group is advocating for in Chicago, as well as some research highlights from the collaborative's findings on alternative response models in other municipalities. So with that, I introduce Dr. Carrillo.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation. I really commend the work that's being done by all of you in Evanston to envision something different for your residents and to ensure that people who are dealing with crisis have a more humane and welcoming level of engagement with your city government, with your social service providers, and definitely making them feel like they can have the support they need to exit that crisis and move on into a healthier lifestyle. So part of our efforts here in Chicago have mirrored some of the conversation and the points that were highlighted today in the recommendations. We have also been very strong proponents for not having a co-responder model for the points that were mentioned above. One of the things that we've seen in our research has been very much similar to yours, where we've explored different cities, San Francisco, Portland, Albuquerque, and seen for us the importance that they have highlighted in the recommendations to keep staffing within the public sector. The importance to maintain employee retention seems to be a key underlining for most of these cities. The idea that pay will, of course, higher levels of pay and benefit will ensure employee retention and prevent turnover seems to be a key part of what these different cities and municipalities have decided upon. Whereas in Chicago, we have the Chicago Department of Public Health has the existing infrastructure for mental health service provision through the city mental health clinics. I really applaud the recommendations that are given today as having clinical support be a core part of the street outreach and the crisis response. What we've seen is that has been one of the common elements for all of the crisis response programs that we've explored as well, having a clinical core to crisis response. As a clinician myself, can really allow people in those moments of crisis to seek the opportunity for the first time maybe in their lives to talk to a clinician and find that welcoming support to then continue and triage into ongoing services. Again, your recommendations really stand out to me in the way that you're highlighting the importance for follow-up. And that is actually some of the things that we've seen in some of the models that have stood out. For example, in municipalities like, I don't want to get the city wrong, but it was in Ohio. Well, I'll reference that later. But there was a very key element in their model to have 24-hour follow-up to people who were engaging in crisis to ensure that people are not going through a revolving door system of touch base with the clinician and then have to call again the crisis response or engage with other crisis calls like 911 or the emergency department. So having the follow-up care has been important, as we've seen in our research as well. Another thing that I would highlight based on, and I commend your vision, to include peer support specialists. That is definitely something that has been an evolution past the CAHOOTS model. We know that the CAHOOTS model necessarily is about building community engagement and rapport, but they have not included peer support specialists to be part of their plan. So I commend the vision to include community residents or people who are with lived experience who can really engage with people at a very interpersonal level. Also, one of the models that we've seen and have often heard as one of the staples for a crisis response team like this would be the EMT, the role of the EMT worker. That has been something that we've seen can be developed in a as needed basis, where crisis response teams can have EMTs, peer support specialists, and clinicians, and teams of 2, depending on the need, could either respond to crisis based on the types of dispatch that are needed for the type of call that would require an EMT or those that would not. Also having an EMT and a clinician be part of a trio that could have a peer support specialist also meet them at the scene in order to have the EMT peel off if not necessary for their continued support of our situation. So, there's very many ways. What we've heard, of course, is that every municipality has to really think about what makes sense for their, with their resources, with their level of investment, and of course with their capacity. I really commend the fact that you're trying to target your initial pilot and be able to build out and to think about the longer term vision. Some of the recommendations that were made to us we're in the same lens to think about how you're building towards maybe a public sector solution, even though you can't necessarily start that at the moment, especially for cities that don't necessarily have that clinical infrastructure. It sounds like that's something you're thinking about. I really, I'm here to answer any questions that I could provide resources for or support with. Again, we are parallel in the process as you are in developing proposals for our city council. We've been working with our aldermen as well, and being able to find ways in which we could maximize efforts but also ensuring that the systems that we're developing can outlive and establish a legacy, a systemic change, a real systemic change where we're creating systems that can outlive our involvement, but it can be a staple of public safety, just like the fire department is and EMTs, right? To have another core of crisis response that could be something that would be built into our infrastructure. We share that vision, and we are partners with you. So thank you for the invitation tonight.
Thank you.
Do you want to add anything? Oh, sorry.
No, I was just, I was confirming that was a conclusion of the presentation, and then we can get into discussion from the committee.
Yeah, I didn't know if Alderman Vale had something to add or not.
I think our committee did a wonderful job of covering, several months of, a lot of conversation, and really appreciate everybody's comments. So interested to hear what others who haven't been on the committee, what questions they have and comment.
Okay. Alderman Suffredin is joining us and wants to jump in. So Alderman Suffredin, welcome.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I appreciate it, Alderman Simmons. How much do we need for this to be a 24/7 thing? Is it do you just multiply out what we're doing with 200,000? Like what's the target number there? Do you guys consider that at all?
We looked at other cities that have budgets of $500,000 to $1 million or more. Obviously, we didn't really look at what this would take to be 24 hours because we have always been told we only have $200,000, and so that's why we looked at like, for instance, Trilogy came and spoke, and they already have a 24-hour kind of response, and so we thought kind of contracting with someone like them would save us some money. I think if we looked at 24 hours, that involves probably more than our 4 people we're targeting if we're sending them out in pairs of 2. So we'd have to just kind of do the math for the salaries there. And the salaries that are in the memoir are the ones we were given from Jen Lin. The other thing we did think about was when these calls seem to come. So looking at the 911 data, it seems like these type of calls for service definitely come all the time, but we're higher in the late afternoon till, late evening. So we thought 2 to 10, 3 to 11. And that seemed to be when our nonprofit and our libraries and things like that were closing down. And so people who might be in crisis don't have anywhere else to go or anywhere else to call. And so that's when the 911 calls are coming in. So long story short, we didn't really price out the 24 hours just because we were given we didn't want to come here with something that was not attainable. We are highly concerned about the limited dollars because, this committee has committed to sticking together through the year to monitor this, as I'm sure our police and city manager will do. And it will be hard to monitor if we just simply don't have enough staff to respond to the calls in need.
And then also in looking at the way other programs in other cities got started, they, in Denver, for example, they started with a 8-hour day of, I think only 5 days a week and only in one part of town. So the idea is you learn with the more limited program, and then you can expand as you gain a better understanding of how it's working.
Thank you. And thank you to all the volunteers who served on the committee.
One actually thing I just thought about in terms of 24 hours, and speaking to Jen Lynn, when she talked about victim advocates, they also, in addition to their salary, have an on-call stipend that I think they pay weekly. And so that we didn't add that into our memo, but that would be another cost for city staff.
I'm wondering if Dr. Castillo, can you add to that around the planning and sort of what your research discovered in terms of funding for like the initial versus the funding that might be needed for the full program?
Yes, thank you. Well, in our conversations with representatives from Albuquerque, their pilot program was totaled. Their planning process was set aside $500,000 for the city, where they then used that amount of money to develop the plan over a nine-month period, and then subsequently fund the overall program at a level of. I have to find my notes for a second. Give me. I don't want to cite the wrong data. So there was a substantial investment in the planning to be part of engagement with different departments. Again, we're talking about the city of Albuquerque, which would definitely be a bigger municipality than Evanston, but we did see that there was set aside the idea that also, as you all are doing, target areas would be then funded with a planned $4.8 million investment over a 2-year period to grow that out. I'll throw some exact numbers. I'll make sure I get my numbers right. I'll throw them into the chat.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
I just want to jump in and say thank you to the committee for your hard work on this. All of the details, pretty thorough and comprehensive, a lot to consider. And I will be looking at it in more detail. Just curious if there is any thought about, based on our service calls and the needs in the community, if you have a path towards getting to that 24-hour, or if you think the community is going to be well served in the way that you initially have it proposed with the budget that you have.
So I think if we start in the model in which we have, it will be better served because we'll have, just one more toolkit for our citizens to use. I think, personally, I think it would be better served for 24 hours. And that was, again, part of our thought. If we were able to contract with a provider that was already doing that, ideally they could kind of pick us up and then provide that 24-hour service. But based on what we learned from the calls and from speaking on the committee were, I think, 4 or 5 people who work in our very prevalent nonprofits. And so they were able to kind of talk to us about what they're doing during the day and what their concerns are for their clientele in the evening. So I do think having us get going in this evening model definitely provide a service. I do think adding on to 24 hours, maybe after a year or whenever we can get there with the funding would make more sense. I think bringing it in-house probably for me was much more important than getting it right off the bat to 24 hours, just so we have some continuation of service and building onto our current public health department would be beneficial. But again, that just was so many limitations. So I do think 24-hour in the future is great, but I think if we can get some service in the evening when people are put out of the library and, Maureen closes at peer services and such, would be quite a help. And then when they're not on these calls, they can be making those follow-up phone calls and checking in with people in a way in which our nonprofits just are limited by their service hours.
We also heard from DC Barnes that through the police department, nights and weekends. So, ultimately, I think it's important. It's kind of when when they're getting the calls that they don't necessarily aren't maybe the right people to respond to, it's when there's no one else around. And so I think in hearing that from the police department and whatnot, I think I agree with Alderman Fleming in regards to ultimately it would be a better service to be allowed 24 hours, but also thinking about the 7 days a week. And our recommendation now obviously is nighttime, but I think we also need to think about as we move forward or can have the funding for it and whatnot, weekends, because that's also a time when other supports are not available.
Thank you. And then excuse me if I missed this, it was a lot of information. Is there, and I understand, Alderman Fleming, I hear you say that bringing it in-house is your preference. Did we have community partners that might be staff, maybe not with the capacity to expand this service, but already providing a service that we could partner with the organization in town?
I think the closest we had to that was Connections, and James, who used to run the outreach, now runs, I think, community services, was on the call, and he talked about, even when he was the only person at Connections, all the calls that he got from our police to help out or go meet someone. So they were really the only ones that we identified as having that current outreach component. And obviously now I think they have 2 or 3 staff, but their focus, obviously really is on the homeless, and this we would want to be able to encompass, many people. So not that I know of, and we have, like I said, many nonprofit providers on the line, but no one was doing this type of outreach already.
Yeah, I think the closest that, I'm sorry, Alderman Simmons.
No, please go ahead.
That we found doing something there would be Trilogy, which is right over, they're all throughout Chicago and they serve Evanston, but are not obviously in Evanston. Their main location is here in Rogers Park. But I think that besides talking about the outreach through Connections, Trilogy, I think, is the closest to home to Evanston that is already providing somewhat of that 24/7 and outreach response.
Awesome. Thank you. Is there any more discussion from the committee? If not, then thank you for a very thorough report. I think that, let me pull up my agenda, I'm sorry.
I think we wanted a little direction. We're kind of, we've done this work so far. We're wanting to know if you all think we should move forward, if there's concerns about us moving forward. Obviously, there's a lot more work to do, but we didn't want to go too far without hearing from you all in terms of if we were going in the right direction.
Sorry, I was able to find that information. I apologize for the delay. I just want to clarify what I said. The street response team that I was referring to was not Albuquerque, it was Portland. And so just to be clear, I just wanted to share those details. What we found was that they had piloted their program in a 5 square mile neighborhood that had the highest volume of calls. It sounds very similar to what you all are proposing, where they started their pilot as well with 2 teams. That both teams had 40 hours capacity each, so they did find opportunities to have those teams on call during the highest volume times that they felt would be the most intentional. Their planning process was they did plan their pilot with $500,000 and rolled that out over a 9-month period. In their case, they have Portland committed to $15 million in this investment and reinvestment into this area, allocating $4.8 million in ongoing funding for the expansion over time, just to give you kind of a base of reference for another city that's doing something similar. Thank
you. And then Alderman Fleming, just for conversation's sake and for the record, this has already been budgeted for?
Yeah, so the $200,000 was budgeted last year. I did speak to City Manager Storley as well as Sarah Flax about the mental health board funding. As you know, she came to us a couple weeks ago about kind of reorganizing that, and we feel like this falls directly, obviously, into mental health services. And she said in March the mental health board is going to reconvene and look at the new fund allocation model. And so she is going to get that to our committee once they kind of get that in writing. Her goal in that new model is to, instead of doing the traditional RFP, she's going to she's working to identify our highest need population and our highest service needs, and then more so asking the community who can meet those needs versus just our traditional way of funding. And so I don't know if that would be something we would need to apply for as a committee, or if the city manager can help us work through that process as a potential another source of funding.
Okay. So, but the 200,000 is already set aside.
Yeah.
It's earmarked in our budget, and okay.
And from what I understand is there yearly, so it shouldn't have to go through finding another $200,000 next year.
Mm-hmm. Did we have any feedback from the from Chief Cook on this? Was that part of the report? I'm sorry.
PC Barnes was on the committee with us.
Okay.
So yeah, she was on the committee, and then Chris Foss, who is the 911 manager, he wasn't on the committee, but he did come to several meetings to give a presentation, as well as Chief Scott came to speak about the ECHO program, which is currently on hold and being kind of reorganized with St. Francis. And so they did talk to us about kind of their future plans with that program as well. We were trying to make sure this wasn't, complemented what we had, and it wasn't a duplication of services.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay. Was there any other discussion from the committee? I think it's a lot of information to take at this point. The direction in terms of committee direction, are you looking for a next action or implementation, or?
I mean, I think
it's my first look at it, so it's in terms of, and it's not on for action. So
right, I wanted to update you guys and see if there were any, kind of red flags that you saw before or else we'll just kind of keep working towards what we have on paper, and we can obviously are available for you all. We're meeting on Tuesdays at 3:30. So we're available for anyone to come and join and give. We just wanted to not get too far out ahead of the committee, and also see if there were any kind of change of course people had suggestions for.
Yeah, nothing is jumping out at me, just a absolute appreciation for the amount of thoughtfulness that's gone into this already, and really glad that you're looking on solutions. I know that the community will be encouraged that there is some action plan and identified partners and identified new positions, and we already have set aside the dollars. So it's not for action, so I don't have a final action, but other than thank you, it looks good at this point, and I don't have anything else to add.
Okay, so we'll come back in another couple months then to kind of give you guys an update of where we are and what has changed and what we've done. And part of that community piece is definitely big. Even for this committee, is committed to community engagement, making sure that community input is there once we get some more things hashed out as well.
Okay, and has that started yet, the community engagement piece?
No, again, you guys were our first step, just to make sure as we're a subcommittee of this committee, we wanted to make sure we checked in with you all. We probably won't do community piece until we get some more things hashed out with, legal and HR and all those kind of things, so that we're not going to them with something that's not even attainable.
Perfect. Well, I think there's no further discussion. Thank you to the committee for being here. Thank you for your hard work. Sorry for the late meeting, but this is what happens sometimes when you're doing good community work. So thank you for your commitment.
Thank you, community members.
And then we have, I believe that is our last agenda item. It is. Is there any items for discussion for communication? Oh, Alderman Ravel, I'm sorry about that.
We need to take our item from earlier this meeting off the table to complete that. So I move to take it off the table if that's necessary.
Second.
So I guess we're ready. Nick, have you found out what the timeline is for us here?
Yes, I had an opportunity to look up the appellate court's order, as well as speak with the corporation counsel. It does need to go to city council this Monday because the brief is due on the 16th of February.
Okay. Well, in that case, I move that we recommend that we sign on to the amicus brief.
Second. Is there any discussion? No discussion?
Nothing?
Thank you.
No discussion for me. I take the direction of the law department, the recommendation of the law department.
Yep, exactly. So I think we can take a vote.
Alderman Braithwaite?
Aye.
Alderman Simmons?
Aye.
Alderman Ravel?
Aye.
Alderman Fleming?
Hi.
Okay, motion passes. And are there any items for communication? With that, may I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Alderman Braithwaite?
Aye.
Alderman Simmons?
Aye.
Alderman Ravel?
Aye.
Alderman Fleming?
Hi.
All right, this meeting is adjourned and we have no other meetings tonight. So everyone have dinner with your families, get a good night rest, drink plenty of water, have some sleepy time tea tonight, and we'll see you later.
Okay.
Right? We're
Thank
done? Okay.
Good night.